The climate mobilization has the greatest project, which is their city-by-city campaign. And it's a race to mobilize with local organizers, coalitions, and city councils around the country to build momentum for the just and adequate emergency climate mobilization that we need and we have to have. And this excellent presentation by John Mitchell explains in detail how to do it. So this is how cities can get completely off fossil fuels and replace that with 100% clean renewable energy sources. This is a video that it's a presentation actually by the climate mobilization for the climate mobilization members. This is just a few slides from the website so that you can get the idea about the climate mobilization. They recognize that humanity faces an existential threat. That means it's a threat to our survival, and to survive, as they say, it's going to take everything we've got. This existential threat, by the way, this was just confirmed formally at the highest level in May of 2018 by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who made the statement that climate change is simply an existential threat to all of life, and most particularly to humanity. The presentation dates from December of 2017, and the presentation was to climate mobilization members earlier in 2018. Now, John Mitchell has worked out a expert, comprehensive, and totally doable, logical, based on today's science and technology, for replacing all of the planet-destroying fossil fuel energy by 100% clean renewable, which means everlasting energy. And I've just copied this one from San Francisco. He's got, I think, on the climate mobilization site at least over half a dozen cities covered, and he's working on doing all the major United States cities. So this particular one is a 44-page plan, thorough plan with references. The climate mobilization recognizes we're in a planetary emergency, and they're urging and inviting people to join the fight for an emergency climate mobilization to protect humanity, to protect our future. Here they have 3 reasons why gradualism won't save us, and they explain why time is up. We have no time left to burn any more fossil fuel energy. And here are 2 of the reasons. The first is the idea of a safe upper limit to warming is a myth. That's absolutely right. This statement was made that there is no safe level of climate change, actually, by the Royal Society in the UK way back in 2009. Reason 2, there is no carbon budget safe to burn. So to avoid a future globally catastrophic climate and oceans disruption, everybody has to get this myth out of their head that we have a climate fossil fuel budget of more fossil fuels to burn. So the climate mobilization is building a mandate for emergency climate mobilization starting locally. They have, and they've already made a great successful start. They have a city-by-city campaign urging local organizers to move hometown governments into climate emergency mode. And why cities? Well, I won't go into that, but it's definitely the way to go.
Climate change is happening currently today. The temperature in the Arctic is about 17 degrees Celsius warmer than normal. This graph, provided by Zach Labe in Los Angeles, of the entire Arctic temperature record, shows that only in the last 5 years or so have we even seen temperatures near where we're at today. All of those little squiggly lines that are near the dark red line are all within the last 5 years, with the norm, the 30-year norm, in the light colored blue graphic. So we are actually witnessing today a shift in the climate regime in the Arctic that is unprecedented in the experience of humanity's civilization, at least in the last 10,000 years that we can tell. Some of the long-term effects that we're going to be seeing from these are perpetual droughts in the west, increased precipitation extremes, heat waves in various parts of the globe, and the impacts to agriculture, water supply, and the necessary migrations that will occur. And this is why we have to get into a mobilization mode now, that we are in a climate emergency, and we need to engage the threat of climate change from that perspective as a national security threat. There's no more time to waste. However, what many don't realize is that even so, right now, the warming that we're experiencing has been offset by a certain amount of time lag that occurs. So we have not yet experienced even the impacts of the climate from our current emissions. It takes about 10 years to experience the full effect. So there is a significant amount of warming already locked in. And so it is because of this that we need to start to engage our local communities in the absence of strong climate leadership in Washington, D.C., to get our local cities and counties and states on board for a climate mobilization response. So this is what it looks like. So if you look at this graphic, this came from an analysis of rooftop solar in the United States versus Australia. And if you look in the middle section here, you'll find that what's called soft costs in the United States versus Canada is almost a third of the total cost of the United States costs, 98 cents, compared to only 9 cents for the same costs in Australia. Similarly, some of the overhead margin has been reduced for Australia. And this is an effect that has been noticed in multiple countries as compared to the United States. In Germany, for instance, they were able to have similar reductions in this flexible portion of the cost of a rooftop solar system. So the concept for the mobilization starts with maximizing the rooftop solar build-outs in a local city or county through market facilitation transition activities that provide bulk purchase of solar, the storage and staging of solar equipment, the training and provision of labor force needs for a massive solar build-out, as well as providing a way to finance these systems using municipal banking, which will allow the upfront costs of these investments to be paid for through financing and then paid off through payments to the normal utility bill, with the value of the solar that's generated to be applied towards the expense of that equipment and that system. These are all practices that have been implemented in different parts of the globe, whether it's Nova Scotia, Canada, some aspects of Sacramento and their municipal utility district, of course, Australia and Germany. With the introduction of ultra low cost solar and a means for capturing that expense that's typically paid to utility companies to purchase their fossil fuel and instead applying that to the local economy, is also the feed-in tariff that allows for a increased value of the electricity based on the time that it's generated. Several studies have been done that show in local communities that implement these kinds of tariff structures, where someone who has solar on their house and generates more electricity than they consume during the day, well, it's actually cost effective now for them to purchase a small battery, a lithium-ion battery, possibly a Powerwall battery from Tesla, or a used battery from a local electric vehicle that has been decommissioned, a Leaf battery, for example, that maybe isn't quite powerful enough for a car, but it's still perfectly good for a home solar storage facility. With a time of use tariff then, and with the prices of batteries dropping to where they are now, being able to sell that power off solar peak will not only reduce the need for fossil fuel generation as the sun goes down, but will increase the value of the overall installation for the homeowner. This is a very recent analysis of last year's costs of lithium-ion batteries. It turns out that with another 50% reduction from our current levels of about $200 per kilowatt hour, of storage, this system will have break-even costs against internal combustion engine vehicles. That's when it will become cheaper to own and operate an electric vehicle than it will be to have a regular gasoline car. And so we are on the cusp of a major societal transition regardless of what we do. However, the transition will be nowhere near fast enough if we do not implement these types of mobilization structures to get off of fossil fuels with the benefits that these things will produce. A recent analysis from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory shows that 75% of all power generated in California could be instead generated through rooftop solar. 54% in the East Coast with limited energy generation from solar, because it's often cloudy at different times of the year, would still be provided if all of the rooftop solar was utilized. And that's a massive potential energy source that's already there. The structures are already there. And the benefit, of course, being that we capture those expenses in fossil fuel consumption and retain that money locally. Every time someone charges their car from their neighbor's solar rooftop array and drives that instead of filling up the gas tank, purchasing gasoline imported from out of the country, that money is retained locally and respent in the local economy. It's called the velocity of money. And the indication is that we could have a 5 to 7% per year annual growth in our local economies with massive increases in employment once we decide to engage the climate crisis for the existential national security threat that it is. Of course, with distributed power generation requires distributed storage. The sun isn't going to be shining 24 hours a day, of course, unless you're in the summer in Alaska. We also require distributed energy storage to help stabilize the grid with the increase in distributed generation, both wind and rooftop solar and grid-tied large solar farm solar. This is a picture of the current battery farm that's being built in Australia. It's actually operational now for the last 3 months. And the production of both energy and grid stability services, called ancillary services to the local grid, have proven that this was a very cost-effective decision by the local government to embrace this technology. I envision these kinds of storage systems being built in most, if not all, electric power substations to help manage the grid, store the locally produced energy. And over time, these systems do pay for themselves, especially as electric vehicles are more widely adopted and those second life electric vehicle batteries start entering the low-cost electric grid storage system. The electrification of transportation for cities and counties relies upon autonomous vehicles in this plan. A lot of people have been afraid a little bit of new technologies like, look, Ma, no hands, driving down the highway. However, we should understand that this technology is already approaching maturity. In fact, there are cities in the United States that are allowing these cars to be operated without drivers, some in Arizona and other locations in the United States. This is an image of a more recent development of an autonomous shuttle fleet. This is the kind of local shuttles that I envision will be used in car-free centers in cities ferrying people from solar charging parking facilities, and as a way to basically transform the local transportation system. These vehicles, with their autonomous vehicle fleet and electric vehicle efficiencies, currently are projected to come in at a cost per passenger mile somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the current costs of municipal busing. So the sooner that a local city and county starts to embrace and implement these technologies, not only will it increase low cost, if not free, local transportation for people, it'll increase the local economy, as well as significantly reduce the impacts of air pollution just from this one aspect of public transportation. In addition, this is an actual picture from General Motors of the type of car that they have started developing their first production line. It's called the General Motors Cruise. This isn't a mirror image. This is an actual front seat of an actual car that's going into production from General Motors. No brake pedals, no steering wheels. And this is the kind of car that is going to be mass produced all over the world in the next 4 years. The sooner that a local city or county starts to implement these types of structures for door-to-door travel, shared vehicle, autonomous vehicle fleets, these cars are also projected to come in at the price at or below the current cost of busing. These are incredibly cost effective, incredibly efficient, and they remove the issue of the first mile, last mile use of public transport. In addition, the way shared fleets have been occurring so far, we know that the rate of people that share their rides goes up dramatically with these types of systems. Right now, the current climate mobilization plan that I've been working on only expects a little bit less than half of the time there will be one other person sharing the ride. However, Lyft and Uber have been experimenting with different ways to promote cost sharing with their vehicles, and they're seeing up to 2 to 3 people on average sharing these select fleets that they have set aside in certain locations, especially among youth, college-age people that want to work together to limit costs. And that has incredible implications as this type of process is normalized for people, say in high school, to share rides and moving up in their age through society. So that's basically the power generation and the transportation aspects, and that is 85% of our total city scale emissions. And with those two alone, we can really transform our society. Everything else will fall into place. However, to make it a very comprehensive plan, I also included other aspects, including food and water conservation, energy conservation activities. So modeling after the Victory Gardens program, this was an actual 1940s supplement that indicated what a person could grow for a family of 2 to 4 people. They call this a small garden. And this is actually about 1/2 of the size of the typical garden that I expect in the plan. With a city, say, of 250,000 people, you would expect something about 12,500 front and backyard gardens, about double this size. Using a comprehensive municipal composting and the utilization of locally generated biochar as a soil amendment with irrigation system, gardening classes, and even labor workforce assistance in the care and harvesting, packaging, and distribution of these food materials. Ultimately, the long-term goal is to achieve as close to 100% resiliency with locally grown produce. The increased availability of locally grown produce is also shown to reduce consumption of meat and other high emissions foodstuffs, as well as packaging and the emissions associated with the growth and transport of these systems in our current commercial farming system. By including biochar that's locally generated, it not only vastly increases local soil fertility, it reduces stormwater runoff, and also replenishes the local aquifer, which is going to be very important for places like Southern California that are experiencing large shifts in precipitation regimes. This is a picture of an actual composting facility. They also include paper in their composting in Nova Scotia. This is the Halifax Regional Municipality. Has about 350,000 people in it, and they generate 75,000 tons of compost each year with a significant amount of biogas, a type of methane basically, that's generated that can be used to generate electricity during the off-peak hours. They use it in their local utility to provide heat for a local university. So this kind of a system utilized in cities all over the country will not only reduce the flows of waste to landfills, but it will also increase local health and economy when people are able to grow, store, and sell their local food using both community-sourced agriculture delivery structures as well as our traditional farmers market systems that are facilitated by the local government as well. In summary, our plan allows for a massive increase of rooftop solar as the backbone of the economic and environmental transition. By reducing the cost of solar by greater than 50% through simple streamlining and market facilitation activities by the local government, we can achieve 70% rooftop saturation for all qualified roofs in the United States, but we're going on, of course, a city by city, county by county scale at this time. It should also be noted that when people have rooftop solar, their likelihood of adopting electric vehicles that they can charge from the system expands greatly. In fact, in Japan, a local electric vehicle company, when someone bought their car and signed up for their local utility green program, they received solar panels free of charge. This is an integrated system that's starting to be affected like an integrated system of storage, solar power generation, and electric vehicle transportation as the radical method to reduce emissions from all sectors in the residential and small commercial environments. We also, of course, promote the large-scale grid solar and wind energy to provide the remaining energy needs of our local communities. Large amounts of battery storage and compressed air energy storage with thermal storage systems that will also reduce electrical costs. And then the municipal vehicle fleets, which it's already projected by the Rocky Mountain Institute that by 2025, these autonomous vehicle fleets operating in the Los Angeles area will generate $14 billion in revenue just in autonomous vehicles alone. If a city municipal fleet is operated, these revenues could be retained by the local city economy and then reapplied towards these very important activities, these national security implication activities that we must engage on as soon as possible if we are going to restore a safe climate for ourselves and our future generations. Okay, other aspects of the societal mobilization, I believe, on a more national scale will require a carbon tax, the development of a national delivery mechanism for energy efficiency and water conservation, the implementation of government-owned, government-operated manufacturing facilities for key technologies that are used in the mobilization. This is directly from the World War II model of what we had going. We had to have government manufacturing if we were going to develop the tools to defeat fascism during World War II. Had we relied on market scale transformation and waiting for weapons to become cost effective, we would have lost World War II. And this is just a no-brainer in my mind, that we need to do this at least for a near-term transition. And then once that happens, we are going to see a massive increase in economic activity, including increased health and interactions between our neighbors as we become self-sufficient, but also interdependent. And of course, the ability to train and move people from the fossil fuel industry, which is already reducing in its workforce over time very rapidly, but also to apply that towards not only the renewable energy and electric vehicle systems that have to be installed, but also, of course, to our regular infrastructure build-outs that are going to be necessary for continued operations going forward, especially as the impacts of climate change grow and their costs grow with each year. The current projections are from the American Lung Association. Our current air pollution impacts due to fossil fuel vehicles is $260 per person per year on average in the United States. Our current expenses on fossil fuels are over $1 trillion annually. These funds, these expenses, up to 15% of our annual household income being spent on these activities alone could be retained locally and will greatly increase the local resiliency and well-being of our local economies. We project approximately 14% of the population being employed directly in this decadal scale transformation of our society away from fossil fuels. We will capture this money and then apply it again to the local economy, where it will be respent locally. And as fewer and fewer people are filling up their gas tanks with gasoline and paying their local utility for the electricity that's being generated from fossil fuels out of state, then as that money is retained, it's spent locally, and then that money is still retained and spent locally. If you cut off the outflows of money and retain money in your local economy, that money stays in your local economy for a much longer period of time, increasing economic activity and well-being of the local economy. And then, of course, we will have to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And so we will need everything that we can, including water, energy, and food, local food resiliency, if we're going to overcome these impacts.